Hi, this is John Smith with ExtraHop Networks. Today I want to talk a little bit about how we can do some integration with a VirusTotal API. A few releases ago, we actually released an event called Remote Response. And if you look here at this particular trigger that we've written, what we've done is we've said, if we have a content type match that's consistent with an application download or an application being run, right? So you really can't query an API against every single URI stem that you observe. You don't want to send your API provider thousands of queries, because what you'll end up doing is either having your API key revoked or a really big bill, right? So please use this with caution. That said, for those types of criteria that are consistent with malicious behavior, like an executable being downloaded, or a remote SSH session to an external IP, something like that. Well, those hopefully don't happen all the time, and so that's a very manageable number that you can use to kind of check against an API. So in this scenario, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check against these content types, right? If I observe one of these content types, I'm going to ask VirusTotal, and I'll get a new API key when this is done. But here I'm going to ask VirusTotal, hey, what do you know about this IP address, right? I'm going to pass the server IP over to VirusTotal and find out if there's a dossier. So the first thing I need is I need a URL that's going to probably match a dossier on VirusTotal, and a good source for that is URL house. So here I see an executable here on this guy, and then here I see an executable here. So let's just click one of these. I'm going to bank on this having a VirusTotal dossier. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to try to run it here from this shell. And when I do this, right, and again, no agents are deployed or anything like this. We're sitting back, operating passively. But what's going to happen is the RevealX platform is going to observe this transaction. It's going to see this transaction happen in real time. And it's going to do, as you see here, it's going to take this IP address, and it's going to, first thing it's going to do is it's going to see that the content type matches one of these content types that we've observed here. And when it sees that, it's going to send the IP address to VirusTotal. And right now we're going to wait for the API to respond, but it's going to send that IP address to VirusTotal, and it's basically going to say, hey, this IP address matches a content type that is consistent with malicious behavior. Not that all of these all transactions of these content types are religious, but those are the ones that you might want to check, right? So it's asking VirusTotal, hey, what do you know about this particular IP address? And as you can see here, right, we've gotten some information back, and you see that it's of 72 samples, 16 of them were actually malicious payloads. So again, we're getting this dossier from VirusTotal, basically telling us that this particular payload does have several matches that are malicious. So that in and of itself is very valuable. Now we have quite a bit of context, right? And we can make use, we can take all of the metadata, nearly 5,000 metrics, that we observe on the wire, and we can string it together, right? In this case, I have some executable activity to an external IP address. And I'm going to ask VirusTotal, hey, somebody downloaded an executable or someone ran a program from this external website. What do you know about this IP? And it's come back with a dossier saying that nearly a quarter of the payloads are malicious. And then we get a detection, and let me just refresh here. There you see a couple. I've been testing this today. We'll see a couple of detections here for this VirusTotal match. I apologize, the Kali browser doesn't render as well as Chrome does. But if we look at this detection, you'll see here that the VirusTotal, that we had an earlier one that had over a third of the matches were malicious, and here we have almost a quarter of them. More than 1 in 5 of the payloads that have been handed over to VirusTotal have actually come back with a malicious dossier on them, right? So again, what was the criteria? We had an application or an executable file downloaded, and it went to an external non-RFC 1918 address, as you can see there. And so because it matched that criteria, we're going to ask VirusTotal, hey, what do you know about this IP address? We can whitelist, Chrome updates. We can whitelist Microsoft updates, Windows update, right? But there's other things you can do. A lot of times I'll check, one of my favorite checks is if WPAD is resolved to an external IP address. That's a great one. You'll definitely want to ask VirusTotal, hey, what do you have on this IP address? Because 600 hosts on my network are trying to use it as a proxy server, right? Another one I use is an SSH open. If someone opens an SSH session with an external customer, in public IP address space that's not owned by my company or isn't part of my AWS, or Azure environment, I definitely might want to ask, VirusTotal about that. But you can also leverage this with recorded future, anomaly, threat quotient, right? The important thing is that you're taking a covert position with a wire data or an NDR product like RevealX. You're sitting back on the network, you're observing in microseconds, you're observing 5,000 metadata metrics, and then you're able to make those and string those together. I don't want to report on every single URI. I don't want to ask my API provider about every single URI. But if I see, Let's Encrypt certificate going to an IP address in a former Soviet bloc state or a CIS nation, right? I might want to check that against VirusTotal or recorded future. So those are some of the things we can do with the platform leveraging the remote response. Again, this is John Smith with ExtraHop Networks, and thank you for watching.